Hi there, sweet friends. I'm Rita Joy, and today is the 10th episode of the Harbor Breeze Home Podcast. I'm so glad you're here today to join the conversation about home organization and clutter personalities. Home organization and decluttering is one of my personal favorite topics and activities, so I initially thought that today's podcast would be a list of decluttering tips to help calm the chaos at home. However, as I thought about it more, I realized it might be more helpful to address first the real life issue of how each of us has a different clutter threshold, and when you put a house full of people together, it can tend to be a real mess. Pun totally intended. So here are some facts I've learned about clutter personalities that may help you be more self-aware of what your own clutter meter is, and also help you to understand the other members in your household a little better too. First of all, why does it even matter the amount of clutter we have in our homes? A few months ago, I took a few free classes on organization. I know, I'm super exciting like that. I really enjoyed learning some scientific facts about the topic of clutter. For instance, studies have shown that living in an environment of clutter can increase our levels of anxiety and stress. Being in a space that is orderly with some empty spaces gives our brains the chance to take a breath from all the chaos. Think of how you feel when you walk into a kitchen and see every surface full of dirty dishes, food, and mess everywhere, versus walking into a kitchen with a clean and cleared off countertop, a sparkling sink faucet, and a bouquet of flowers in the corner. Did you react differently to those two examples? One of those makes me feel like, oh no, look at all the work I have to do, and the other one makes me feel like kind of energized. Along with causing anxiety, clutter also contributes to the inability to relax, causes feelings of overwhelm, wastes time as it makes you spend countless minutes looking for things you've lost, and actually costs more money because not finding things invariably causes you to have to go buy duplicate items. I decided to do a quick Google search to see if there were perhaps different clutter personality types, and sure enough, I found all kinds of articles with different descriptions and categories. Again, I found it fascinating. Apparently, I'm easily entertained. Here are a few different clutter personalities I found while searching. Maybe you'll recognize yourself in some of these or someone you love with these descriptions. Number 1, the organization guru. This person loves the challenge of organization and spends time researching tips and tricks to make their spaces function better and more efficiently. They define beauty as an organized space with everything in its place, with color coordination and stylish labels. They tend to be perfectionistic and are always feeling they're behind, organizing something and always looking to improve on their systems. Number 2. The I can't get rid of this, I might need it someday person. The fact is, physical things have a real emotional attachment in our lives. Taken to the extreme, if a person feels fear over getting rid of items and clutter, again, in extreme situations, this person may find themselves in a situation like we see on the hoarders shows. Number 3. I'm too overwhelmed to make that decision today person. It may be helpful to note that if someone has ADHD or a similar condition to that, decluttering and the decisions related to it can be absolutely paralyzing. If you're a person that feels that way when decluttering is mentioned, be assured, first of all, that you're not alone. And secondly, there are tools online and maybe in your local area to help if you struggle with that. Do some Google searches and you'll find a lot of things. Number 4, the rebel, you can't make me organize anything person. I giggled when I read that description in an article. I definitely know some kids that used to have that attitude when their mother asked them to tidy up. However, real problems arise when adults still have a 4-year-old rebel attitude towards their own home clutter. They haven't understood the concept that they're the adult now and mom just isn't going to come behind them and clean up after them. Other clutter personalities I found included the stasher, who throws things behind closet doors and rooms to hide it. The collector, who proudly displays books, knickknacks, and growing collections of whatever catches their fancy. The sentimentalist saver keeps everything for their children to deal with when they pass away. The savvy shopper can't stop buying cheap things even though there are rooms full of items not being used. And the creative always is trying something new and getting all the things to do it. I'm sure that's not an exhaustive list, but it shows that everyone has a different idea of what's an acceptable amount of items or clutter that they can live with on a daily basis. The tricky part is when more than one clutter personality lives together and their clutter meters don't match. Someone once told me that as a mom watching her kids full-time, it was my responsibility to set the noise meter in my home, meaning what level of noise was acceptable in our home. I had to train my boys then to understand what acceptable noise was. Just like having a noise meter is important in your home, someone needs to set a clutter meter as well. Here are some ideas that help make that happen. Here are some steps to making clutter compromises and find order and peace in your home. Number 1, determine the standard of clutter and what the norm should be on a daily basis. This might require a few heart-to-heart conversations with your spouse and kids and the other members in your household. It might take some time to set up systems and find a place for everything initially, but once it's set up, it should help everyone. Number 2, a good rule of thumb is that the places that everyone in the house shares should be kept at the standard of orderliness that you all have agreed upon. I remember when the boys were little, I had a goal to train them so they could be helpful around the home when they became adults. I decided at one point that I wanted to teach them to make their bed every morning before they left for school. The first hurdle was to teach them how to use a top sheet. I believed, and still do, by the way, that the proper way to make a bed is with a fitted sheet, a flat sheet, and then blankets or comforters. Even though I made my boys' beds like that all the time, for whatever reason, they hated using that top sheet. So I gave them careful instructions showing them how to make their beds just so. I read that forming new habits takes 30 days of consistent practice, so I put it on my mental to-do list to work with them every day for 30 days. And like the snap of my fingers, after 30 days, I thought their beds would be blissfully made and they'd leave for school with neat and tidy rooms. Oh, my stars and garters. Bless you, sweet friends. If you've trained your children to make their beds impeccably every morning, I applaud you and give you an extra jewel in your crown. But it did not work out that way. Every morning for us became a battle of the wills as I tried to get them to make those beds. About halfway through the experiment, I discovered that the boys were wadding up the top sheets and stuffing them under the beds. Then they were making the bed as if it was there. I struggled and struggled and struggled until one day my husband told me the only new habit that was forming was that I was reminding the boys every morning to make their beds. If I didn't remind them, it didn't happen. I was feeling like a complete failure in the train up your child department and asked an older, wiser friend what she did to help her kids learn how to clean their rooms. I'll never forget how she threw her head back and giggled and said, "Want to know the secret?" "Of course I do," I said. "Close their doors." I was so relieved to discover this very wise woman had kids with very messy rooms too. So I can't do any coaching on how to have your kids' rooms neat and tidy all the time. It just did not work that way at our house. But I did work with them, trying to teach them things like choosing sentimental school papers to save that would fit in a certain size tote, letting go of toys and clothes that they no longer used or fit them. And yes, they did have to make their beds and vacuum their floors every now and then too. I'm going to break into this episode for a minute to tell you about 2 resources that have helped me as I've tried to learn about controlling clutter and creating order in our home. One is a small book by Marie Kondo called Magic of Tidying Up, and the other is a book by Melissa Michaels, Make Room for What You Love. I will link both of those resources in the show notes if you'd like some more specific help in the areas of purging and home organization. Okay, now back to the show. I don't want to do an episode on organization without leaving you with some practical tips if you're wanting to work on that in your own home. Like I mentioned in the commercial break, I found some super practical things through reading books on the topic of home organization. If you head to your local public library, you'll most likely find a lot of books on the subject. Each one will probably offer different perspectives and solutions, so choose the ones that seem like they would work for you. Here are some of the tricks I use in my own house. Number 1, determine what the organizational goal is and why. Figure out where the problems are and think about what solutions there might be. For instance, if your living room bookcases are overflowing with so many books, bins of kids' toys, and papers that need to be filed in the office that is starting to spill over onto the floor and all the surrounding surfaces, maybe you want to have for your organization goal to pare down the items so they all fit neatly in that contained space, or maybe you want to move some of the items to different spots. Another organization tip is to start small and give yourself a quick win. Try this. Set your timer for 15 minutes and choose one area in your home that's been driving you crazy and wish it were more organized. I'm thinking of something like your silverware drawers, entryway closet, or the desk drawer where all your pens are. Work quickly and focus. Empty everything out and sort as you're emptying. Put things in piles quickly without thinking too long and hard about it. Don't overthink this. You should have 3 main piles: keep, get rid of, or put somewhere else. Put the keep items neatly back into the space you're organizing. Throw out the garbage items and take the put somewhere else things wherever they belong. You might find it helpful to have a designated space where you put things that you want to donate to your local thrift stores. I have a table in our garage that I set those things on, and then when I have a few bags full, we do a drop-off. Trust me, you can do so much more in 15 minutes than you ever dreamed you could. Giving yourself a quick win in the organization and purging department will be like a ripple effect. Organizing one area will lead to organizing another, and the more you do it, the quicker you'll be able to make decisions. At the point where you're starting to put things back neatly is when you might want to purchase some organizational bins or baskets. But please, don't start the organization process by buying those cute bins and baskets. That rarely works out well. Until you know the specifics of what you need and the size it needs to be, you'll just be wasting your money collecting boxes and baskets that sit taking up space, adding to the clutter problem. I've found the very, very best motivation for organization and purging is moving to a different house. Nothing forces the process of having to touch and make decisions about every single item you own more than moving. Moving should cause a natural process of purging and organization. As I mentioned in episode 3, we've moved 9 times in the 32 years we've been married. And side note, if you're moving anytime soon, I recently wrote an article called A Mom's Guide to Moving, which gives tips and tricks when you're moving from one house to another. However, even though we've lived in lots of different homes, as I look back, when you move to a larger house than what you're currently living in, you tend to end up accumulating much more than you realized. And then when you downsize dramatically, you learn all kinds of new lessons on purging and organization. I have some things to say on that subject too, but we'll leave those for another day. Oh, but I do want to leave you with one more resource that you might find helpful. I've put together a free printable decluttering planner that includes some questions to ask yourself when you're purging items. You can sign up for the link in the show notes, and I'll include some articles I've previously written on organization that may be of help to you too. So that's all I have for you today, sweet friend. I hope you have an absolutely marvelous day. Until next time, toodaloo.